Alright, now let's finish up this unit with 16C, the ratification process, state by state. So, if you're ready to ratify the Constitution, let's get to it. Okay, so the first step in the ratification process was for state conventions like the one in Massachusetts to debate the pros and cons of the new Constitution. And there were two dominant viewpoints. On one side were the Federalists, supporters of the Constitution, and on the other side were the Anti-Federalists who opposed it. Now, the Federalists had a couple of advantages. First, they had the support of some very influential people, including George Washington, John Jay, and James Madison. Second, most of the state conventions were dominated by Federalists. And that's because the delegates to these conventions were not elected by popular vote. They were mostly appointed by state legislatures and governors who were often Federalist sympathizers. But the biggest advantage the Federalists had was the argument that the new Constitution was actually a very good thing for states' rights. Despite the fact that the Constitution did establish a strong national government, Federalists argued that the central government would only be powerful because the states had given it that power. Without the states, the central government would be nothing more than a paper tiger. Now, the Anti-Federalists knew they were outgunned and outmanned. And so, to counter the Federalists' arguments, they demanded a Bill of Rights. And in order to get the ninth state to ratify the Constitution, the Federalists finally agreed to add a Bill of Rights. Now, after Massachusetts came Delaware, the very first state to ratify the Constitution. Next came New Hampshire, which became the ninth state to ratify. And with that, the Federalists had enough states to declare the Constitution the supreme law of the land, but they still weren't done. They wanted all the states to ratify the Constitution. So next up was Virginia. And although Virginia was a large state with lots of influential anti-slavery advocates like Patrick Henry, the Constitution was ultimately ratified. And that was also true of New York. But the last state to ratify wasn't in the original 13 colonies. It was Rhode Island, and they didn't ratify until 1790. So why did it take so long? Well, Rhode Island was the last state to join the Union anyway, so they had little incentive to join the Constitution. Plus, they had some serious internal divisions over the issue. But eventually the Constitution was ratified. And so the final step in the process was for the public to be persuaded that the Constitution was a good thing. And how did the framers do